towards the end zone. Underthrown, touchdown! Trey Tucker to the end zone it goes! Caught! Touchdown, Armon Benz!
It's Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, and he's my co-host, Neil Meyer, right across the way from me, right here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. It is just a few days before the season kicks off at Nippert Stadium. We are excited about that. Neil Meyer of the frontofficenews.com, Cincinnati Rivals, and Russ Heltman with you all from Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. We are presented by Bet Online. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of that $200K. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. We'll preview the game this weekend between Cincinnati and Towson, but not before we get to the latest commitment for Cincinnati. Unranked player, but could be another one of those instances where Cincinnati finds a diamond in the rough far before other teams across the country. We'll get to DaMari Witherspoon, I think his name is, from the class of 2025 joining the Bearcats. And then we'll get to a recap of kind of what's going on this week and a game one preview, what to watch for out of Cincinnati against Towson. That should be a fun game. We'll get to DaMari Witherspoon. First, though, right here on Bearcat Blitz. Stay with us. Coming back at you after these messages. Neil, Cincinnati has another tight end in the fold to join DaMari Witherspoon. He's another guy that has flipped from wide receiver to tight end, similar to DaMari Smith. Went through a brutal injury in 2023 that kind of had him flip his position, and just looking at his profile. So he's kind of very new to the tight end realm, to the tight end ranking side of things. He's not ranked on a major service right now, and Cincinnati was his, I believe, lone Power 5 offer coming off of the month of August. But overall, Neil, this could be maybe another chance for Cincinnati to find a diamond in the rough out of the East Paulding tight end.
Yeah, no, most certainly. Russ, kind of a guy who's been a late bloomer, obviously, despite the injury you mentioned. It was actually happened at the beginning of 2023 in his sophomore season, or towards the end of his sophomore season playing basketball. He suffered a torn ACL, sidelined him for the whole 2023 season. So obviously he went through the rehab process, got back right. But Russ, obviously during that time, he really transformed his body. He's listed at 6'5", 205 pounds, but he put on 30 pounds from the sophomore season to where we're at now. Obviously within that span of missing that time while rehabbing, he's put on 30 pounds. So overall, that's what that transition has been like there to the tight end. But overall, the injury happened during basketball. He's back healthy. He had a great week 1. So this was a guy who was on campus in the summer and really, really stood out to tight ends coach Josh Stepp, who was the lead recruiter for DaMari Witherspoon. So overall, this is another one of those late ads that could be another diamond in the rough. Russ, obviously, as you mentioned, Cincinnati was the only Power 5 offer for Witherspoon, with a lot of MAC offers. If you look down at his list, he had Toledo, Ball State, Buffalo. I believe Kent State was in there as well, Marshall. So there's a lot of other schools in there. Georgia Tech is also in the mix as well as of late. So overall, this is a kid whose recruiting is just starting to really climb. But, I mean, Russ, he has the size and the intangibles that they are looking for at that tight end position. So overall, 6'5", 225 pounds. It could be another one of those diamond in the roughs. Obviously, he's not ranked by many major recruiting sites. Rivals has him as a high 2-star with a 5.4 overall rating. So overall, could be a guy that really has a big senior season, sees that recruitment start to climb. But Cincinnati is going to be home for DaMari Witherspoon there, which makes the 16th member of the 2025 recruiting class as well. So overall, another addition for the 2025 recruiting class.
Decent ad. I think you had to get another tight end in the class. They get another one and a guy who could blow up this season. Who knows? That's a crazy big senior year, and it could be tough to keep him around, let alone him going into this year. Compared to this year, going into this year, UC being his only power conference offer in terms of this season and where we could be at the end of the high school football season. We're not even close to the end of any seasons as we're getting ready to preview game 1 of the 2024 season. We'll do that right after this on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Neil, game day is nearly here. 2:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff for the Bearcats against Towson. That is going to be a massive, massive big day. Always is, kicking off a season opener for Cincinnati. They're trying to win their 23rd consecutive home opener in front of the Cincinnati fans. And they're welcoming a Towson team, Neil, that neither you or I think they should have much trouble at all with Towson. Under 500 last year, 5-6 overall. This is just not a good team. No matter any way you slice it. Only 4 projected CAA all-conference performers. One of them was an honorable mention at that. Maybe one guy on either side of the ball that scares you, and they're not really at premium positions. When you think about the daunting tight end that Towson is bringing to the table, and let me pull up his name here, Carter Runyon, I believe, and then they have a strong defensive tackle on the other side, Deion Cruz-Harris. All in all, though, Neil, should be at least a 30-point win, and it's more so a fact of will they cover the 31.5-point spread than the debate of will they beat Towson on Saturday.
Yeah, overall, Russ, too, and it's worth noting that as long as they're going for that 23rd straight home opener victory on Saturday, this is also worth noting that this is the first time these two teams have ever squared off. So overall, you get a new matchup at Nippert Stadium on Saturday to kick off the 2024 season, but it's been a highly anticipated offseason. Everybody knows the buildup that's heading into Towson, especially after the season that Cincinnati endured last year. It's going to be interesting to see how they come out and handle Towson. Obviously, Russ, I think you and I both know this is a game where Cincinnati could win by multiple scores, hopefully that 30-point margin, which is the spread of this one. But it's going to be interesting to see really what kind of product Cincinnati will put out on the field. Now, we obviously know what we're going to get with Brendan Sorsby at the quarterback. Russ and I have been on the scene throughout all of spring, fall camp as well to really kind of get a firsthand look there. But it's going to be interesting, Russ. Obviously, still a lot of things to take into situation here. The status of Dante Corleone is still up in the air for Saturday. So it's going to be interesting to see how that defensive line kind of really works its magic up front in the trenches. So there's a lot of things to keep an eye on. But when you're looking at Towson, the big thing to really look is, as you mentioned, is the tight end position. Obviously, this is a guy who's been on a lot of preseason award watch lists in Carter Runyon. So it's going to be interesting to see what Cincinnati has able to do to really kind of find ways to take him out of the picture. Because as many people who know, last season, Cincinnati really struggled with covering the tight ends for opposing teams. So overall, it's going to be interesting to see how the defensive scheme looks, especially for the first year under Tyson Veit. Fans will get a great look at that. But it's also worth noting too, Russ, that it's going to be a great day to play some football. I think the weather forecast is looking good, 85 and sunny. So overall, it's going to be a great day at Nippert Stadium on Saturday.
I wouldn't speak so soon, Neil. We got about at least a 40% chance of rain like all Saturday. So it might be a little
rain forecast won't hurt nothing.
Hopefully not. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I'll be in the press box.
Yeah, right.
I will not be on the sideline. So doesn't matter as long as we stave off any thunderstorms. Don't want to have any delays, and we'd like to keep the fans dry as well. It'd be nice to get not get any rain for sure on Saturday. Overall, though, Neil, like it's interesting going into one of these games because to me it's like preseason. This is a preseason game. You don't really take away much from the highest of the highs, but I think you can take some stuff away from the lowest of the lows if that does show up. And when I look at the offensive side of the ball, I'm just keying in on getting Brendan Sorsby in a rhythm, getting him in congruency with his receivers, getting this hierarchy of a target range kind of defined among, is Xavier Henderson going to be the top guy? Is Joe Royer going to be a top guy? Is Jamoy Mays going to be a top guy? Just figuring that all out on Saturday. And I think you kind of have to just take a great performance with a grain of salt. You had to do that last year with Emory Jones. Neil, what do you do? He was like Peyton Manning 2014 last year against Eastern Kentucky, 345 yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean, even
he
if
only
Brendan
had like 4 incompletions too.
Right. He played about as well as you could possibly play. And it was probably the best individual game performance in his entire college career. Just setting aside the quality of opponent and just going pure performance in the box score. So I think it's going to be hard to really definitively say UC is good or bad, even if they win 56-17 or 49-14 and they end up covering the spread set at 31.5 right now across most major sports books. But I think you can breathe a sigh of relief when that happens. And then hopefully you don't see any of this, but any signs, Neil, that things are not on the same page, that carryover from last year's issues are starting to seep in early this year, it's going to be a little bit frustrating, a little bit of a head scratching thing to see. Not that I expect to see any of that, but overall, you just want to get offensively Brendan Sorsby in a rhythm. We know what this offensive line can do. We know what Corey Kiner can do. We know what this rushing attack is. Getting Brendan Sorsby in a rhythm, getting him comfortable into the kind of ins and outs of this offense in live game action is what I'm going to be keying in on. And especially when you think about him having to go through a little bit of a shift on his offensive line, we'll see whether or not DeAndre Buford is out there on Saturday. It's a little bit up in the air. Scott Satterfield a little bit hesitant to say he will definitively go on Saturday. We did see him out there getting reps at practice on Tuesday. Philip Wilder not out there at practice on Tuesday, and he's not going to play on Saturday, Neil. It would be shocking to see Philip Wilder out there. So what does that offensive line on the right side look like protection-wise for Brendan Sorsby? And how does Brendan Sorsby look overall? Just his comfortability with the playbook, his comfortability with the passing concepts, and his comfortability taking hits for the first time in over 9 months. That's going to be interesting for me to see.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And obviously, you discussing the offensive line there, obviously a little banged up. Coach Satterfield did mention in his weekly press conference that they still were working DeAndre Buford back, but he was able to practice starting last Sunday after missing a little bit of time, and now he was out there on Tuesday. So that was a great sign, but obviously he still wasn't 100% sure on the status of Phil Wilder. So that's something to kind of monitor as the season as the week progresses. But overall, the offensive line, everybody knows what they're getting up front. Obviously, now it's going to be the question is what kind of happens there on the right side in terms of the protection aspect. But this is an offensive line that returns everybody from a season ago. And then also the development of the guys underneath. This should be a week where you see that second string offensive line really get a lot of reps. Obviously, that's something Scott Satterfield has preached all offseason is the depth at that position. So it's really going to be interesting to see that. But it's going to be interesting to see how Brendan Sorsby goes through his progressions in terms of going against another defense. Who's going to be the guys that stand out on the receiver? Obviously, teams know what you're going to get with Xavier Henderson. You know he's going to be the number one wide receiver. A lot of teams are going to hone in and focus on this season. But then it's going to be who's going to be those guys that step up behind him, whether that's a Jamoy Mays, a Tyron Smith, an Aaron Turner, a Sterling Burkhalter, and Evan Prater. Who's going to be those guys that really step in there behind him? So that's going to be something to watch. But also, Russ, me personally, I'm really excited to see Joe Royer and how he really excels in this offense. Obviously, he's had a fantastic camp. And it's worth noting that he's even felt that this is the most confident that he has felt heading into a season in quite some time, he told the media on Tuesday. So overall, that's a great sight to hear. Obviously, he said this is the most football he's played in a while, too. So he's excited to be out there. He didn't say how many family members are expected to be in attendance on Saturday, but overall, there should be a big contingent of 11 jerseys, and it's going to be really exciting to see what Brendan Sorsby in this offense is capable of doing on Saturday.
19 passing touchdowns allowed last year, 8.4 yards per attempt. So they didn't give up a ton of scores through the air, but they were hemorrhaging yards on passing attempts to their opponents. The Towson Tigers were in 2023. And on top of that, Corey Kiner in this rushing attack should have a field day, Neil, an absolute field day. 193 yards per game allowed last season, 4.8 yards per carry. I mean, this should be a road grading fiesta, cha-cha-chan all the way down the field to the end zone for this rushing attack out of Cincinnati. What will we see out of Brendan Sorsby? That's the biggest thing I'm keying in on. And like we mentioned, like last year, Emory Jones, 345 yards, 5 touchdowns. I don't know if he combined for 345 yards and 5 touchdowns in any 2-game stretch for the rest of the year following that. But there is way more reason to believe that a great performance on Saturday can be more consistently pulled out by Brendan Sorsby the rest of the season because of his intangibles, his age, the trajectory of his career, all things that are ticking up in a more positive and I would say projectably good scenario than what you had in the Emory Jones swan song of his college career last season with Cincinnati. Defensively, Neil, will they be able to stop the run? Will they be able to stop the run this season at all? And will they be able to stop the run during this stretch of games where we're not going to see Dante Corleone on Saturday? I would be even more shocked to see Dante Corleone than I would be to see Philip Wilder, just because like he hasn't gotten a week of practice in. I would be shocked if the medical team allows him to play without a full week of contact practice and the results and testing from that full week to carry into a game like action. So they don't know exactly when they're going to get him back, Neil. They're hopeful during this opening month, but again, Scott Satterfield, Tyson Veit, they've just been kind of vague because they have to be vague. They know as much as we know essentially in terms of the exact date that they're going to get Dante Corleone back. There is no exact date hammered out right now. So Kamari Burns, Cam Rutherford, Harris Adams, that nose tackle interior, what does it look like? How does it fare against this tune-up game, this preseason type game in Towson versus the big fellas of the ACC next week, the best team in the Mid-American Conference, arguably the following week on the road in the Miami Redhawks, and then a team in Houston that you should be able to weather their rushing attack with your talent, even without Dante Corleone. But Neil, I mean, he's massive. Played all 12 games last season, 440 total snaps, over 200 snaps against running on run plays, and even with him, UC allowed 5.35 yards per carry, 6th worst in the entire country, and the 111th ranked rushing yards per game tally, allowed 176.9. That's the biggest thing I'm looking for, Neil. Can Kamari Burns, Cam Rutherford, and Harris Adams provide enough resistance without Dante Corleone out there to let this newly infused speed at linebacker get in there and work their magic from Jock Dingle, Jared Bartlett, and Jake Golday? And this improved secondary, in my eyes, especially in the run game, it should be improved. I think even more so than immediate improvements passing game-wise. When you look at Derek Canteen, elite run defender, had his best run defense season last year, and Mekhi Miller, another near elite run defender and a guy who could stuff the second level as well. Big opportunity for this defensive rushing kind of wall to build something up and start building momentum for the rest of the season after arguably the worst run defense performance they've put up all century as a program.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, Russ, as you mentioned, to see how does this defensive line really hold up. Obviously, everybody knows the status of Dante Corleone still up in the air. Then you lose a guy like Michael Coleman and then Jalen Hunt for the season. It's really going to be interesting to see what these linemen are capable of doing this season. Obviously, that was another big position that they went out and addressed in the transfer portal with Cam Rutherford, Harris Adams, a couple other guys there. So overall, it's going to be interesting to see what they really try and have to find up there at that defensive line. Obviously, this is going to be something that's obviously when you lose arguably your biggest defensive portal addition in Michael Coleman to a season-ending injury, and then you lose Jalen Hunt to an injury, it's going to be something that's probably going to be played by committee for a majority of the season until somebody really kind of solidifies their spot. But it's going to be something that's by committee probably for the first few weeks at least, especially trying to stay healthy heading into Big 12 play. But the depth there at that position is going to be what's interesting to see and kind of watch. Obviously, Russ, we've heard Scott Satterfield give a lot of praise to what Cam Rutherford has been able to do this fall camp. He's had a great camp as well, too. He's really got great speed, great twitch, can really find ways to get after the quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see that. It's going to be interesting to see Kamari Burns. Obviously, he's not the 320 pounds that Dante Corleone is up there front in the nose guard, but he does provide some stuff there that can really maybe open things up for the linebacker room to really find to get going downhill and use that speed and attack the quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Cincinnati's defense really stopped the run game, because Russ, for those who watched last season, despite having all those veteran guys up front, Cincinnati really struggled to stop the run game. I mean, with Jawan Briggs, Malik Vann, Eric Phillips as well out there last season, they really struggled to stop the run game. And a great look at that, Russ. I mean, you look at how many games they lost last season and how many of them came down to the run game. You were tied 14-14 with Oklahoma State at halftime. Ollie Gordon takes over. There's games down the stretch there where they just could not stop the run game, and that just wore the defense down, and ultimately that one thing led to another. So overall, the key importance is to stopping the run. So it's going to be interesting to see how does this defensive line that is banged up really kind of lock in, solidify their position, and really try to hone in there in the trenches.
56-17. I'm not changing my prediction. What are you rolling with, Neil?
I'm going to go 49-17.
We both have them covering. Do with that what you will. Bearcat Blitz. That ties a bow on this week's episode. We'll be back on Monday to recap game 1 and start priming the people for Pitt's return trip to Cincinnati. They're back in Nippert Stadium trying to get rid of some old demons of their own from the last few times they've been at Cincinnati. And Bearcats fans are hoping to keep the good vibes rolling from Pitt versus UC games at the NIP. It's going to be a lot of fun covering this season. Can't wait to do it with Neil. We'll be with you right here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
6, Ritter to the end zone, looking for Pierce. Did he hang on? Yes. Touchdown. Back as I've been around. Here he goes again. Busts free. Jerome Ford down the sideline. Foot race. House call. Touchdown. 79 yards. Big one in the Peach Bowl. This is a big one too.